Now available on Kickstarter, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this all-new Kickstarter exclusive John Haynes comic book. Put in your pledge and get the standard, variant, or retro covers of John Haynes at Death's Door and other great stretch goal rewards on Kickstarter today. I got a comment from a viewer looking to gloat about the success of Eric D. July's successful launch of his Rippaverse line of comics. And this individual wanted to go out here and say that Comicsgate was the reason why your Eric D. July had all of this success in launching his Rippaverse. Now, when I heard that statement, it made me realize why all of these so-called Comicsgate guys are going out here to support your YoungRippa59. And the reason why many of these Comicsgate people are out here supporting your Young Rippa goes back to a statement I heard from the brother of Logic and Common Sense regarding the passing of the late Kevin Samuels, when he said that your Kevin Samuels and his supporters were basically safe haven Negroes. Now, the concept of the safe haven Negro is he's someone who will just stay in his lane and stay in his part of a community. And that's what many of the comic skaters believe your Eric D. July is. They basically believe he's a safe haven Negro, and that is the main reason why your Comicsgate came out in force to support your Eric D. July, because they believe that he is a safe haven Negro. And he's a safe haven Negro to them because they believe he will be that safe black guy that they can go out here and trust to not really stir up the entire comic book community, and he will not be a threat to the racists in the comic book industry. They believe that your Eric D. July will be that safe haven Negro, and they got a confirmation of that with a picture that he took with who I believe to be a mass shooter, your Kyle Rittenhouse. Once most of these Comicsgate guys saw your Eric D. July in that photo with Kyle Rittenhouse, that was all they needed to confirm that he would be a safe haven Negro, because if he's standing next to Kyle Rittenhouse and he's not saying a thing about your Kyle Rittenhouse, they can believe that he will just give them a pass for the overt and covert racism that go on in the hobby of comic books and comic book collecting. That image basically was showing us that these guys thought he was with the subtle politics that they were transpiring around everyone, and that's the main reason why your Comicsgate guys are rushing behind Eric D. July, because they believe that he will provide them a safe haven so that they can continue participating in their racism and continue perpetuating the institution of white supremacy inside of this hobby we call comic book collecting. That is the only reason why they came out in force. I mean, yes, I know your Young Rippa has a big following. However, I believe that many of these Comicsgate people, they know that when they've got a safe black guy, they can go out here and support the safe black guy, because that allows them to be able to say, hey, I'm not a racist. Hey, I'm not a white supremacist. I'm not any sort of bigot. No, I don't have to be any of those things, because I have a black friend, and this black friend, he's standing out here and he's supporting the same politics that I support. And that is the great irony of your Comicsgate, which originally was supposed to be all about bringing quality comics to people, but your Comicsgate over the last couple of years hasn't really brought many good comics into the hands of readers. No, ironically, when it comes down to your Comicsgate, it seems like your politics have to be just right in order for them to endorse and support your comics, even though your Comicsgate oftentimes talks about merit as related to quality of comics, but whenever you go to many of the comics YouTube channels, they never really talk that much about comics outside of the bad Marvel and DC comics that are currently out there. Because over the last couple of years, whenever you go to a comic channel that is affiliated with Comicsgate, they are always complaining about the bad things in the comic book industry, and they're always talking about Marvel and DC comics, but they never talk about many of the quality independent comics that are currently out there, like the series Count Crowley from Dark Horse Comics, and they don't talk about books like Hit Me, which is giving you a commentary about predatory females, and they don't talk about quality Marvel comics that are currently selling, like Moon Knight right now, and they don't talk about these quality comics and try to get comics into the hands of readers. No, what they do is they spend most of their time generating controversies and trying to start drama in the hopes of getting views for their YouTube channels and trying to get AdSense dollars for themselves. It's no different than what I saw in the black sector of YouTube with your Kevin Samuels and many of the other channels that piggybacked on him as he rode to success with his high value man narrative. What you're seeing right now with Young Rippa is no different than what happened with the late Kevin Samuels. YouTube allowed your Kevin Samuels to rise to popularity, and as your Kevin Samuels rose to popularity, people piggybacked on him in an effort to get views for their channel, and as they were out here, they had this safe haven black person to be there, to go out here and be their leader. And the same thing is happening with Young Rippa. Your Comicsgate wants to go out here and try to revive their popularity by piggybacking on the success of a Young Rippa, and what they want to do is go out here and make themselves back into stars like they were from 2015 to about 2018, I would believe. And the whole thing is that they want to go out here and again use the safe haven Negro as an express to vault themselves to popularity, but they had nothing to do with Young Rippa's success. No, Young Rippa's success was on his own. Unfortunately, he cannot see that these white folks that he's trying to get with really have ulterior motives, because when they saw that picture of him with Kyle Rittenhouse, that was all that they needed to say that he was safe. And once they saw that he was safe, what they did was they jumped on his bandwagon and wanted to coast on his popularity. They wanted to propel him up because, again, he's a safe haven Negro, and a safe haven Negro allows them an opportunity to go out here and continue participating in their racism, because whenever they want to be racist, what they do is they trot out their safe haven Negro, use him as a buffer, and then use him to say, hey, we're not racist. No, we're all about diversity and inclusion. And again, a lot of people don't really see the games as related to the subtle politics transpiring around them, as related to the far left and the far right, and they don't see how both sides go out here and play a chess game, and they use people like pawns. And that's something that I don't think your Young Rippa really understands about what's possibly going on here with these Comicsgate people trying to take credit for his success. What they're trying to do, again, is use him as the safe haven so that they can use him as a buffer. And then when they use you as a buffer, what they do is they go out here and can continue participating in business as usual, because the far left social justice warriors are no different than those on the far right, and you have to be in the center to see the subtle politics transpiring around you with both groups, because both groups look to take advantage of black people, and they look to use black people to go out here and perpetuate their system of white supremacy. And if you're not aware of what's going on as related to that system, you'll go out here and get taken advantage of because what white supremacy loves to do is they love to have an individual that they can use and use them to undermine the progress of the group. What they want to do is keep you from you being somebody who can go out here and empower other black people. They want to get you into this whole rainbow and go along to get along narrative that sadly many people, black people in the comic book world, have gotten into. And then they use you like they use Christian Cooper as a shield, and they use you to go out here and speak against things that could wind up helping black people, like the way if Christian Cooper had pressed charges against the Central Park Karen. So they love to go out here and get these kinds of black people to be their representatives, so passively they can talk about representation, but aggressively they can talk about racism. So they'll use, again, they'll use a guy like Eric D. July who doesn't know, I believe, what's going on behind the scenes. They'll go out here, take credit for all of his hard work that he did, and then they'll go out here and use him as a representative for their narratives. And that's exactly what Comicsgate is trying to do right now. And that's why Comicsgate has gone out here and supported him, because they see somebody who will go along with their narratives, and what they want to do is attach an emotional hose to him, create a covert contract with him, and then have him going out here thinking that he's out here getting all of this support, but in actuality he's getting this support in exchange for being silent on issues as related to racism in the comic book industry. That's what they try to do with individuals like a YoungRippa, but sadly many black comic fans and many black sci-fi and fantasy fans can't see the chess game that's going on, because they're caught up in their emotions about the success, but they don't understand that the success came with a string. And whenever you're dealing with white supremacists, there's always catches, there's always strings, and they always look to tie you up in strings. And if they tie you up in strings, it's eventually so that they can go out here and break you. And that's something I learned from Professor Black Truth, is that white supremacy always breaks its toys, and it always goes out here and breaks its buffers, because once they get rid of their buffers, they go out here and break them so nobody else can use them. But when I look at this whole situation with this Comicsgate again, it looks like your Comicsgate is only claiming Eric July because they can use him as a buffer to continue perpetuating their racism, because once they saw the picture of him with Kyle Rittenhouse, that was all they needed to know, that this was a safe Negro, and that's all they needed to know in order to know that this guy will not challenge their systems. He will not challenge the lack of black hires in comics. He won't challenge any of the covert and overt racism in the industry. Once they saw the picture of him with Kyle Rittenhouse, that was all they needed to know, and that's why they supported the Rippaverse. It really wasn't about good comics, because there are plenty of good comics out there that many of these comic YouTubers could have recommended. No, ironically, while these guys talk about identity politics in comics, they were participating in politics right behind the scenes, and many people couldn't see the politics because they were in their feelings about so-called woke comics. But you have to wake up to what's really going on here as related to this, because if Fox News is celebrating a black guy, again, they're celebrating him for a reason, and that reason is that they see this guy as a safe haven Negro, and the safe haven is that they have, the safety by using this guy as a shield. And sadly, a lot of the safe haven Negroes, like a Kevin Samuels and a YoungRippa, don't see how they are being used and they are being pawns. The reason why they are allowed to come up on these platforms is because these individuals know that they are no threat to white supremacy. They're not going to talk about black empowerment. They're not going to challenge many of the anti-black racist images in comics, or the anti-black stories, like these token black characters. They're not going to challenge it like I do, where I talk about how your black Batman is just a hand-me-down hero. They're not going to talk about how many of the black characters that they race swap are nothing but tokens, and they're not going to talk about that because it doesn't fit their narrative, and they don't want a guy out here who doesn't fit their narrative out here because they want to be able to control the narrative. And that's what Comicsgate is all about. Really, it's about controlling the narrative in comics. It's not about getting quality comics in the hands of readers. No, Comicsgate had a chance to get lots of great comics in the hands of readers over the years, but did not but talk about SJWs all the time. And talking about SJWs doesn't get comics in the hands of readers like what I'm trying to do. When I go out here and I review indie comics, it's because I want to see indie creators get readers for their books, and I want to see those indie comic producers be able to expand their business platforms. That's not something you want to see with Comicsgate, again, because Comicsgate seems like it's all about just going out here and elevating only those who fit their politics, and they blow off any other independent creator out there without as related to the merit of their work. So when I got that comment from that reader, I had to say, you want to sit there and gloat about Young Rippa, but you ignore the fact that I have a Kickstarter that there was an ad for, and that really shows us that this really wasn't about supporting a comic or trying to help out other comic creators. That no, this is all about these people's politics and their own personal feelings, and them going out here and having their own little junior high school clique. And what they want to do is have their junior high school clique where they can be the gatekeepers and the kingmakers, and that's not what comics are all about. Because if we had that type of system back in the 80s when I was buying comics, you would never have seen your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles be a franchise that was $1 billion, and you would have never seen many of the other independent companies like your Now Comics and your First Comics come up and give us great concepts like E-Man and Warp. You would have never seen the independent comic market grow because these guys who were so busy complaining about Marvel and DC, and really they're complaining about Marvel and DC because they have a covert contract where they're looking to get work at Marvel and DC, we would have never seen a rise of independent comics, and we would never seen the independent comic book market grow. Because everybody would have been complaining about Jim Shooter back in the 80s and how much of an evil man he was. I mean, if the internet was around in the 80s, we would have heard everybody complaining about Jim Shooter and talking about he was some sort of evil person, and we would have been hearing all of these constant complaints about the Crisis of Infinite Earths had we had these people who are currently in comics today on the internet. They would have really complained and resisted a lot of the changes which made comics great back in the 80s. But that's what I see again here with a lot of these people. They're looking to gloat about your Young Rippa's success, but if your Young Rippa didn't have that politics that they had with that picture of Kyle Rittenhouse, I doubt many of those people would have been supporting him the way that they did in Comicsgate. Yes, your Young Rippa has a big following, but I doubt he would have become that phenomenon, because once they saw that picture with Kyle Rittenhouse, that was all they needed to know, that he was the safe haven Negro, and that he was a safe haven to preserve the smooth world of the dysfunctional comic book industry that we currently have today. Now, I currently have my own comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, on Kickstarter right now, and if you want to put in a pledge for that comic, you may do so by clicking the link to the Kickstarter in the description box. And if you want to learn more about the John Haynes character, you can pick up the books of the John Haynes series on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find John Haynes books on Smashwords, the iBook Store, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a wicked werewolf in this action-packed all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Horror of the Hyena Woman in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in Paperback and e-readers, Isis Legacy. The sorority secrets of the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis Legacy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.